Unusually, the Conservative former Justice Secretary David Gauke is in the face of all of this, not the actual Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who we haven't actually seen recently, but it's in a rare cross-party collaboration. The review recommends that judges should be able to impose football bans as a standalone punishment. At the moment, bans are generally only used in addition to sentences. They'd consider the ban for any lower level offence, such as non-violent theft or drug crimes, if they think it will be an effective punishment. Now, I look at the two of you. You're both football fans. I mean, I ask you personally, did you think this would teach you a lesson?
Oh, give me a break. No. I mean, I'm thinking of banning myself, as a West Ham fan, I'm thinking of banning myself from football next year because it's just been so dreadful. I'm sure you'll agree with that one, Matthew. But it's like, come on, look, these are criminals. And they're a bit vague about what level of criminals. I know they've said that it's for lower level crimes, but they've also admitted in this piece that they can't guarantee that it won't be for more violent criminals. I'm thinking, I'm not sure of this. But I mean, look, I've known people that have been banned from football, okay, not me, but banned from football. There's ways around that for a start. It's not going to deter crime. It's not going to stop criminals. It's not going to make victims feel safer. And it's not going to help the situation.
Who have you been hanging out with? Who have you been hanging out with?
Well, you most of the time, Matthew. But,
I'm not
God,
banned.
I wouldn't mention that one.
Look, this obviously won't work unless the person involved likes football, right? I mean,
there is that.
So presumably it would be targeted. Would it be a punishment for me never to be able to go to live sport again, or not to be able to go to live sport again for 5 years? It would hurt like hell.
Oh, you'd get around it.
I'm going to cricket tomorrow. I'm going to rugby on Saturday.
Yeah.
So look, I'm in favour of trying to be creative and imaginative in our judicial system. Of course, if you have just been the victim of crime, for example, I had my phone nicked from behind by someone on one of those fast bikes, had dogs in the left hand, your immediate reaction is you want them punished. It's totally natural. You want them to go to prison. The question is, are we better off as a society if we're packing our prisons with people on short sentences? David Gauke was a former Justice Secretary of the Tory party.
Yep.
When he was Justice Secretary, it wasn't for long, he was trying to tackle this idea, I think, of short sentences not really working. Now he's been given the chance by a Labour government to look into things. It's right that they're looking into them, but of course they have to work. And one more point.
Yeah.
I am conflicted on issues of law and order because I do think you need deterrent and I do think you need punishment, and certainly for serious crimes you obviously need prison. And if our prisons are overcrowded, how difficult can it be for a government that keeps saying it's going to cut through the bureaucracy, cut through the red tape to build some more prisons? So at least we have the option to do that if these sorts of schemes turn out not to work.
Well, there'll be a lot of people agreeing with you on that one. I wonder whether, Kathleen, you do up in Birmingham. Kathleen?
Hello, Rob, and hello, panel. I don't... they should be banned from football. But what I'm going to say now is there should be more youth centres and catching them at a very young age so that they can learn skills for life. When I was a teenager, there was lots of youth centres where I could do all sorts of different things. Today here in Birmingham, we have only got one youth centre open. Now, if there was more of that, and I think if you catch children, teenagers, you can change their views. You can, and if it starts at a very early age, and they're learning something, you can maybe change a person's life.
Well, thank you for that, Kathleen. I think the point you're making is that it's one thing to be potentially tough on crime or think about what you do once somebody's committed a crime, but you make a point that a number of our callers make, and certainly many people I speak to, which was we need to get better on the tougher on the causes of crime, and especially providing spaces for young people. Dawn, I wonder about how this works practically. I remember when I was a barrister representing people for smaller offences before I ended up graduating, or certainly my clients did, to more serious ones, that you might be given a more lenient sentence, let's say. There was a case that emerged in circumstances where you could demonstrably prove that you were a drug addict, let's say. Now, it's very important that we deal with drug addiction, and that is undoubtedly one of the underlying issues that's never addressed that forces people back into prison, as is people not being able to read, as is mental health. Now, we all agree on that. But what you found is once some of the criminals became aware that if you've got a drug addiction and you're a street dealer, you were going to get less prison time, suddenly all of them became serious drug addicts. Now, it's a very, very difficult thing to assess in practical terms. Now, I wonder how it is that a judge is going to be able to determine, oh, you are a football fan. I mean, how would that actually work in real life?
It's not going to work, Rob, is it? I mean, it's frankly one of the more ridiculous things I've heard come out of this review. That the whole system does need to be looked at. The bottom line is we need to build more prisons. We do. Yep. And that's not been happening at the moment. I think we need to build, what is it? Let me see, blah, blah. About 5 medium-sized prisons a year to keep up with the amounts of
Well, the Ministry of Justice's latest prison population projections are for England and Wales. They were published in 2024. The estimated prison population would increase between 95,000 or close to 115,000 by March 2028, with a central estimate of about 105,000, which means we need a lot more places. I've got friends who are judges who are simply looking at offenders, many of whom, just to be clear, right, have committed terrible offences, including offences of sexual violence, right, where it's a cusp of the custody threshold, as they say. And they say, well, I'd like to send you to prison, but there's no room. What does that say about society?
That's why I say you have to have prisons. You have to have that basic fallback option, because otherwise society starts to fall apart. Once you have that infrastructure, then as a matter of choice, you can start being creative with punishments. But I say once you have that infrastructure, we don't at the moment, and therefore they are being forced to be creative. This, Labour would argue, to be fair to them, is an inheritance from the Conservatives who were in power before them for 14 years.
They always do that. Every government always says, yeah, it's that lot's fault.
But it is.
I mean, at some point they're going to have to stop doing that and start looking after the people that vote for them. But what about deporting the foreign prisoners we have? There's 10,000 of them.
Well, hopefully we'll be coming back to that one. You know, Maria, you're in Portsmouth. Look, the reason we punish people isn't just to punish them, but also to make sure, hopefully, that they don't do it again. Otherwise, we end up spending money on punishments, and they come back and they're more dangerous in the communities, and often they come out, these people, as our neighbours. Do you think stopping people going to football, especially if they like it, is actually going to stop people committing crime? That's a central issue, isn't it, Maria?
Well, what we need to do is just get it simple as simple. If you're committing a crime at a football match, you're banned.
Yep. Well, that's already the case. So let me help you with this one, Maria. If you commit a crime that's related to football, you can get, put it simply, it's a bit like an ASBO. You can actually get a ban, and that can be issued against you fairly straightforwardly at the time that you are either found guilty of an offence relating to football or after a trial. What they're suggesting here, so people understand, is that regardless of whether your offence got anything to do with going to football, if you are a shoplifter or if you're the terrible person that mugged Matt, if you like football, we're going to say to you, on top of whatever community service you've been punished to, you're also banned from football matches. What do you reckon for that?
Yeah, we ban them from football matches.
You think?
Yeah, no, we've got to make it as simple. If you are committing these sort of, I think they're classed as a phrase or whatever they're classed as now, but we need to say enough's enough. If you are committing an offence like this at a football match, you're banned.
Well, I hear you. Thanks very much, Maria. Roy, just to be clear, well, I'm going to go over, because you're in Wolverhampton, one of my favourite parts of the world, where people speak common sense. What do you think? Do you think that even if it's got nothing to do with football, right? So the offence you've committed is miles away from a football stadium. It's perhaps your third offence. Nothing has worked. And the judge says, here's the deal. You're going to do community service. And by the way, no football for you and no games for you for 3 years. Do you think that's going to make any difference?
Do you think it's going to stop them going to football? They'll do exactly what they want, like they always do.
Well,
if you're not going to send people to prison, that stops them going to football. The thing is, what's the point of the judges and the juries and the policemen? If every time you catch somebody, you say, well, look, just behave yourself. They've got to be punished.
Yeah.
And I think what they should do is every time there's a crime, they should ask the victim, what he feels. Get a consensus there, because I tell you what, it'd be a lot different to what some people are saying.
Well, you do get victim impact statements already in our judicial system, but you certainly don't want to hand over the justice system to victims. Otherwise, you might get all sorts of things like hanging, drawing and quartering coming back.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point. But nevertheless, I mean, Roy's not wrong. He represents a huge amount of sentiment across the country, say that people, most especially victims, aren't necessarily listened to.
The reason we're having this conversation is because prison at the moment first of all, they're full, but also it's not really working. People re-offend at an astonishingly high rate. Yeah. So, of course, we want some punishment. It's totally natural, as I said already, but we also want to become a safer society with less crime. And if prison is creating more crime, let's think creatively about how to change that.
Especially if it's the same cycle. They're going to prison, petty crime, there's no assistance, no help with reading. Anyone that's got an opinion about prisons, oftentimes, when it's one saying it's all a cushy place to be, often hasn't visited a prison, mental health, etc., etc. Unless we deal with those issues, frankly...
I've actually had 2 relatives serve time in prison, one for a very violent offence, and thankfully both of them were rehabilitated and got onto the lead really, really good, healthy, happy lives with families themselves. So I'm all for rehabilitation, but I thought Roy made an incredibly valuable point there. The victims in this. We talk about what to do with the offenders, what we can do to them, what we can do, how we can make their life easier, how we can rehabilitate them. What about the victims? We very, very rarely talk about victims in these cases.
Thanks, Roy in Wolverhampton. Rona on the Isle of Wight. What do you think about this? Do you think if you were the victim of crime, you then subsequently discovered that what happened to the criminal was that he was banned from going to football, would you be satisfied with that, Rona?
No, what it is, I think prisons should be made like prisons, not like holiday camps. They are holiday camps.
Rona, can I ask you? Rona, can I ask you?
Anybody says the prison. You want to see it when they advertise that they show you the prisons. All right.
Rona, can I ask you, sorry to interrupt you, Rona, do listen to me for a second. I'll ask you, have you ever been into a prison, perhaps as a prison visitor, which you're entitled to do, to go and inspect? Why not? Would you go if you were offered the opportunity?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Now, what if I were to tell you, Rona, that in the prisons that you're talking about, often where they're understaffed...
Oh, I'm not talking about the Isle of Wight.
No, but what...
the Isle of Wight.
No, of course not.
The prisons all over the country.
No, absolutely. But, Rona, what if I were to tell you that they're so understaffed that a lot of young prisoners, for example, but across the prison population are in their cells often 23 hours a day? And what if I were to tell you that people that keep committing the same offences, oftentimes they can't read, many times they've got drug addiction. A lot of the time they come from backgrounds where perhaps dyslexia hasn't been treated. All of the things that we know, and nobody's actually addressed any of those issues. What if I tell you, if you actually paid some money to deal with those issues, you could live in a safer community on the Isle of Wight? Would you be for that, do you reckon, or do you think we should just make them much harsher?
I think they should make them harsher, because I'm not being funny, but especially these kids nowadays, they commit the crimes, but they're laughing. They're laughing at us. They're laughing at us. Oh, well, it's all right. We'll go to prison. You can play, you can have a game of tennis or golf or, you name it. That you can play. It's better than staying out of prison.
It's just not true.
Before I come to you, Matt, Rona, there's a lot of people, I want to be fair to you, up and down the country who take that view. Prison, like millions of people along, we're going to say it's not harsh enough. It should be nasty, brutish and short. The short,
Talking about people we hang out with, someone I used to know didn't end up, but went to Wandsworth prison. Just as an example, believe me, the standards in that prison were absolutely appalling. Look at the Scrubs near where I am in West London. Wormwood Scrubs. Trust me, you do not want to be going to these places. I think they've got rats in some prisons. It's absolutely disgusting. Your point about 23 hours. Imagine that, 23 hours every day in a cell, probably with your cellmate. That is like living hell. You don't want to be going to prison.
As Rona would say, though, and I'm sorry putting words in your mouth if I am Rona, as Rona would say, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Yeah, but we also want to be a civilised society, and how we judge ourselves as a civilised society is how we judge, how we treat our most vulnerable. And actually, prisoners are, despite having done terrible crimes, of course I don't want crimes committed against me, my family, or anyone else, but they are vulnerable. Of course
bring
they
it
are.
back to what this debate is about. The whole point is not to send them to prison,
Yes.
exactly as we'll be talking about. What about different approaches? And this is one of them. But before we get to the end of this discussion, the question is, do you think it works to say we're going to take away some of the things you enjoy?
Yeah, but it has
including
to
going
be,
to football.
but
Very quickly.
Obviously, it has to be common sense, as I said at the start. If you don't like football, or if you're going to pretend that you like football, I mean, it's only going to work if you love football and you're then banned from football. Otherwise, forget it.
Well, perhaps we take away other things too. Very quickly, Dawn Neesom.
No, it won't work. Criminals will always find a way to bend the law in any case.
And that's what people are saying. Thank you to Rona and everybody else that's called in later. It's the papers and everything else.